David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's not often that I go to Fox News to illustrate non-sarcastic points or go to Fox News to illustrate a serious political point or news reporting reality. But yesterday we had this absolutely horrific stock market crash, which was so bad that even Fox News had to cut away from Donald Trump bragging about the economy to cover the precipitous crash of the stock market. And if you're not up to speed on the facts, the last two stock market trading days, and so far early today as well, might have changed by the time you hear this later today, it has been an absolute disaster. Last Friday, in the middle of the release of the memo fiasco, which of course ended up being a total nothing burger, as I told you yesterday, uncertainty ramped up. The Dow lost about 666 points. Now, why am I talking only about the Dow? Well, hold on. I'll get to that because I know that's been a question for many people in the audience. And yesterday, once again, the stock market crashing down as much as 1,600 points in one day, which was about 5%, ultimately ending the day down 1,175 points, which was the biggest single day decline in points in history. But of course, we need to adjust for inflation to find out whether it's the biggest real decline. And of course, the Dow is an average, not an index. But in any case, the biggest single point decline. During the 2008 financial meltdown, the biggest single day decline was 778 points. This is a 50% bigger decline than the biggest previous one, which was during the 2008 economic crisis. Now, Trump, at the time that this was taking place, happened to have gone to Blue Ash, Ohio, to brag about how great the economy was, as well as calling Democrats treasonous and a whole bunch of other stuff. And while the president is bragging about the great economy, the crash starts, and even Fox News had to cut away. Check this out.
Organs. And thanks to your tax cuts, we see continued success in the future.
We're interrupting for breaking news. There is quite a drop happening on Wall Street. A massive sell-off is happening today. Moments ago, we were down more than 900 points on the session, right. 3.5%.
And it got way worse. That was early in the crash. And really just bad optics for Trump, right? We have a picture that we're going to put up on the screen with the title, Trump sells tax plan at Ohio factory. This is from MSNBC. And then you see on screen at the same time a bug following the Dow movement. Dow plunges down 792 points at this time. And here is Donald Trump, again, calling Democrats treasonous as the stock market collapses before our eyes.
And you have the other side, even on positive news, really positive news like that, they were like death and un-American. Un-American. Somebody said treasonous. I mean, yeah, I guess why not? You know, can we call that treason? Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, they certainly didn't seem to love our country very much.
So first of all, I want to take this stock market crash in pieces. Number one, let's debunk the idea that the left is cheering this. I started watching coverage of this yesterday, and you had all sorts of right-wingers saying it is horrible that the left is happy that there was a precipitous market decline 2 days in a row. I don't know anyone on the left that's cheering this. I lost as a result of this what to me is a significant amount of money. I'm not cheering it. I'm not cheering the fact that the retirement accounts of both Democrats and Republicans alike are suffering because of this. I'm not cheering it. I'm not surprised because ultimately the empty run-up of the stock market was going to fall at some point because the underlying economic principles of the Trump White House are not economically stimulative. But no, I'm not cheering and I'm not rooting against the American economy. And I don't know anyone on the left, Pat, that's happy about this.
I mean, we may not support specific Trump or Republican policies, but the economy at large, of course we want that to succeed.
Of course, so much is riding on this. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you want a strong economy. I'm sort of rooting for the removal of a terrible steward of the American economy and Donald Trump. That's number one. So now let's go through the layers of this. First of all, there's people saying to me, rightly so, David, hold on. you've always said the Dow isn't a good overall representative of the stock market, and the stock market isn't the be-all, end-all of the economy. Well, yeah, let's take those one by one. The Dow is an average, not an index, and of only 30 companies. So I think we have to look past the Dow. Unfortunately, the NASDAQ, which has the biggest tech stocks in it, and the S&P 500, which is a much broader index of companies, also got crushed on Friday and yesterday. The Dow drop got the attention, as it often does, but the broader markets were also down significantly. Now, part two is the stock market really a good indicator of how the economy is doing? And as I've said before, it's one part, but it's what Trump has been pointing to tout a great economy. Even though Trump really hasn't done much that would justify such a huge market run-up, Trump has said, because the markets have increased, I'm doing well. And conflating the stock market with the economy was problematic to begin with. But if Trump believes that the strength of the economy is in the stock market, and if he believes that the stock markets ran up because of him, then it only follows that the decline is also both his fault and indicative of a worsening economy. Now, I was wondering, how is the White House going to react to this? And of course, Trump didn't mention it. Silence from the White House, except when Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about it. She said, listen, the day-to-day changes in the stock market have never really been a focus of the administration, except for Trump on dozens of occasions pointing to a new record high in the stock market. Other than that, you mean, Sarah, it's not been a focus of the administration?
And Sarah Huckabee Sanders could be right in the sense that this could just be a simple correction, and in the next coming days, the stock market and the Dow Jones could go back up.
Sure.
But you never really know. The stock market ebbs and flows, and we haven't really seen a crash this big, arguably since the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, 2010. And who knows how Trump would handle a poor economy?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he would try to blame someone else, right? Either Democrats who aren't working with him or something left over from Obama or whatever. And the same alt-rightists who have been touting the increased stock market to sort of cheer Donald Trump's prowess with the economy are now jumping all aboard the conspiracy train, and that's what I want to talk about next. We've seen the alt-right just pray at the altar of Trump for the economic success that they saw through the run-up in the stock market since Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. And now that we have seen the biggest single-day decline in the Dow Jones Industrial Average on a point basis, they are saying, not, well, maybe we were wrong about Trump. They are saying, is this not a false flag meant to hurt Donald Trump politically? Conspiracy theorist and scam supplement salesman Alex Jones tweeted as this was happening, is the historic 1,500-point Dow drop a false flag by the big banks? Should we investigate Goldman Sachs? It's kind of funny to mention Goldman Sachs because Trump's administration is filled with Goldman Sachs people. Why would you investigate them? They're on Trump's team. Is the idea that the people on Trump's team from Goldman Sachs are involved in crashing the stock market?
Yeah, you got Gary Cohn, the chief economic advisor, and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary.
And
these
probably,
aren't coffee boys.
Probably also some lower echelon people as well that we don't even know, right? It's unlikely those are the only two Goldman people that Trump has hired. This is sort of like gas prices, right? Either the president is responsible for both the ups and the downs, or for neither, but you can't have it both ways. And the horrible part is people fall for this drivel. The real tragedy is that there is a significant portion of the followers of Alex Jones and of Donald Trump and whoever else who fall for this stuff. And there actually is a real conspiracy theory here. It's the one that unregulated capitalism is sort of a pyramid scheme that redistributes wealth from the poor to the rich. That's the real conspiracy here, the oligarchical, kleptocratic conspiracy theory. They never talk about that one. But this one they believe. And if you look at some of the responses to Alex Jones' tweets, people are eating this stuff up like it is real. One example, yes, I thought as much. Thanks, Alex, for being one of the few voices reporting the truth. Another person on Twitter who really liked this from Alex Jones, I agree. Is this the deep state? Our government retaliation against Trump? may sound crazy. That's right, it does. But what can we believe nowadays? I won't show you too many more of these. They make me a little sick to my stomach, actually. It would be easier to write this stuff off as a joke, but when you see that it influences so many people, we've got to address it in some way. But the problem that exists is the people who believe this stuff also believe that they will be told it's not true and that that's part of the conspiracy. So if you go to them and you say, hey, hold on a second, here's a reason why this doesn't make sense, here's another reason why this doesn't make sense, they will say that's part of the conspiracy. Those talking points are part of the conspiracy. So it's a closed loop. There's doxastic closure, to take a phrase from Peter Boghossian. And I don't know how we should be handling this.
Yeah, and whatever Alex Jones says is gospel to them, too. They won't disagree. And Alex Jones has tied himself to Donald Trump at this point. He says that he calls Trump from time to time.
Oh, sure.
Even last month, he made a phone call to the White House.
You believe that?
I don't know. I mean, like, you're dealing with the word of Trump versus Alex Jones.
Right.
I tend to believe it. Trump in that scenario? I don't know.
That's a tough one. If you've got Alex Jones and Donald Trump explaining to you what it is that you need to do to save humanity, I don't know who you listen to. I really don't. So anyway, I know most people in our audience don't fall for this stuff, but there are people who do, and I do think it's important to point it out. Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and we've got one heck of a program for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Karen Gossage. Thank you so much, Karen, for joining the David Pakman Show. And today's sustaining member of the day is Brittany Gentile, who has been a member dating all the way back to November of 2010. What a day. Was it November 4th, 2010? That might have been the day of the midterms.
Was that election day?
I don't know. I actually have no idea, but it's possible.
That
anyway,
would make sense.
It makes sense that would be a day where people would sign up. Karen, thank you. Brittany, thank you. Join Karen and Brittany at davidpakman.com/membership. Very briefly, I previously told you about the progressive musical act Deep Glass, who is promoting their self-titled new album, also called Deep Glass, available at cdbaby.com and on iTunes. They did something amazing, which is they sponsored half of 20 David Pakman Show memberships. And of those 20, yesterday I told you that 7 remained. There are now 2 of these memberships left. If you want one of these remaining 2 half-priced yearly memberships, they normally cost $60. Deep Glass has already paid for $30. So there's 2 memberships left where you pay $30, but you get the full membership and you get to keep that price for as long as you want. And for every album sold on cdbaby.com or through iTunes between now and when the memberships run out, $3 will be donated to the Institute for Women's Policy Research by Deep Glass. So check out the Deep Glass self-titled album on CD Baby and on iTunes, and email me if you want one of the last remaining 2 half-price memberships. Don't assume someone else will get them, because if everybody does that, then we'll have 2 memberships unspoken for. If you have an interest in it, email me, and hopefully you will get that half-price membership. The shoving into the limelight of Devin Nunes by his harebrained involvement in the FBI's investigation of possible Trump-Russia collusion has been backfiring hilariously for him. First, he exposed himself as a sort of hacky partisan shill when, while he was running the House investigation into Trump-Russia collusion, he went to the White House to tell President Trump what was going on in the investigation. Absolutely ludicrous. Should have been removed from Congress for it. Barely any consequences for him. Then he writes this memo summarizing intelligence he never saw. And as I broke down for you yesterday, the memo was released. And even if everything in the memo is true, it exposes nothing major that would impact the integrity of Robert Mueller's investigation. And we don't even know if the stuff in the memo is true. but we knew that it contained at least one major lie about a statement made, or I guess in reality not made, by former FBI Director James Comey in 2017. I went through that lie yesterday. I won't do it again today, but he straight up misrepresents what James Comey said. And now, the cherry on top, Nunes appeared on Fox News' Fox and Friends, and he decided to make the claim that Donald Trump has never met indicted Trump crony George Papadopoulos. And sadly, that's what we call a lie in the real world. And there's a picture of Trump and Papadopoulos together. And that picture has been out for a while. Let's first check out Devin Nunes, who's becoming incredibly proficient at digging himself into holes on Fox and Friends.
The whole thing goes about Carter Page. Some say, well, what about Papadopoulos? They started looking at him earlier. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that if Papadopoulos was such a major figure, why didn't you get a warrant on him? If Papadopoulos was such a major figure, you had nothing on him. You know, the guy lied. As far as we can tell, Papadopoulos never even knew who Trump was, or never even had met with the president. And look, getting drunk in London and talking to diplomats, saying that you don't like Hillary Clinton, is really, I think it's kind of scary that our intelligence agencies would take that and use it against an American citizen.
Okay. Yeah. There is no spinning this whatsoever, right? Here is a picture of Papadopoulos at a table of maybe 10 people, along with Jeff Sessions and other high-level advisors to Trump. And this was a meeting during which Papadopoulos was meeting with Trump in his capacity as an advisor. Now, people have started trying to get ahead of this, saying, well, Nunes said met with, not met, and met with suggests a one-on-one meeting where they're individually hanging out, but met just means, oh, well, they might have been in the same place at the same time at some point. As unlikely as that is, we don't really need to wonder, because Trump himself said, oh yeah, George Papadopoulos, he's a great guy. Remember this audio?
Waleed Ferris, who you probably know, PhD, advisor to the House of Representatives caucus, and he's a counterterrorism expert. Carter Page, PhD. George Papadopoulos, he's an oil and energy consultant, excellent guy.
Excellent guy. So if they didn't know each other, it's an incredible series of coincidences where Trump is lying or mistaken when he says he knows Papadopoulos is an excellent guy. And even though they had an advisory meeting and sat at the same table, they never spoke to each other nor were introduced, but yet Trump still knew that he was an excellent guy. The chain of facts you have to believe to make Devin Nunes' statement correct is just too long, right? Occam's razor. There's a much simpler explanation, which is they know each other, they knew each other, and Devin Nunes is lying because they want to put distance between a guy who was indicted in the Trump-Russia investigation and Trump.
Yeah, I mean, you say that Devin Nunes was lying. The other possibility was that he just didn't know that there was a meeting between Trump and Papadopoulos. And usually you rank lying as worse than just not knowing, right?
Certainly,
I mean, it's
yes.
that malice versus negligence.
And the law agrees with that, right? Perjury, you're not going to be charged with perjury if you don't remember something or if you don't know.
But the thing here is that Devin Nunes is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he's been working on this for a year.
Yeah.
So he should know more than I do, and I knew about this meeting.
That's exactly the point. If Joe down the street, who's busy working and supporting his family and making vegan shakes or whatever he's doing during the day, if he doesn't know the truth about Donald Trump and George Papadopoulos' acquaintance, who the hell cares, right? It's of no consequences. When Devin Nunes, who is in a position of real power here, doesn't know something as simple as an indictee of the investigation did know Trump and was an advisor to Trump and sat at a table with Trump, then we're in real trouble. And Nunes has a habit of lying about provable statements of facts, misquoting James Comey, incorrectly stating that one of the people indicted by Robert Mueller's investigation never met Trump. And in fact, he's becoming so blatantly dishonest that not only is it reminiscent of Trump, I'm starting to wonder whether Trump has something on Nunes, and that's why Nunes is behaving so erratically. But remember, when you do Trump's bidding, Trump rewards you, and that's exactly what Trump has been doing. Trump tweeting yesterday about Devin Nunes, Representative Devin Nunes, a man of tremendous courage and grit, may someday be recognized as a great American hero for what he has exposed and what he has had to endure. Very binary with Trump. You lie for him and you're a hero. You tell the FBI or the American people or whoever the truth, and Trump goes after you like a rabid dog.
Yeah, and contrast that tweet with the one about Adam Schiff, the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee.
Treasonous, right?
Well, he's little Adam Schiff, which means that Trump is starting to recycle his insults.
I know, it's getting old, isn't it? It's depressing. This is really bad. We've got to watch not Adam Schiff. We've got to watch Devin Nunes very, very closely. Despite the federal government under Trump and Jeff Sessions moving more and more and more against marijuana, yet another state is moving forward towards decriminalization and legalization. This time it's Virginia. The Senate in Virginia voted anonymously, 40-0, to legalize medical marijuana extracts in the state. This is Bill SB 726, and it would allow doctors in Virginia to recommend cannabidiol oil or THCA oil for treating a variety of conditions and diseases. House already passed its version of the bill. Governor expected to sign it. CBD and THCA have been shown effective at dealing with patients suffering from epilepsy, people who need help managing pain, and a number of other conditions. And Virginia is interesting because they're also being hit very hard by the opioid crisis. And we have studies from other states that show us, not at all surprisingly, that when you legalize or decriminalize medical and or recreational marijuana, opioid overdoses decrease. And, you know, there are people rightly pointing out, David, this is so minor. Not only is it medical and not recreational, it's just extracts, CBD and THCA. It's not even the medical smoking of the marijuana plant. You're right, but the momentum is clear, right? And my view on this, Pat, is when you've got the federal government going so far, so aggressively in the opposite direction, any step forward, even just this from Virginia, is something that we should be glad about and applaud.
Yeah, and to get that unanimous vote, it required 21 Republicans, which you wouldn't have seen even 10 years ago. And I think the GOP is giving up on this issue. It's the next social issue that they're going to lose.
Maybe at the state level. I mean, federally, Sessions is still pushing hard, but increasingly at the state level, you see it not a priority for Republicans. And, you know, where we need to go is full legalization, and most importantly, the rescheduling of marijuana at the federal level. We've got to get it out of Schedule 1, right? Schedule 1 is supposed to be reserved for the most dangerous and addicting substances with no medical benefits. Cannabis clearly does not fit into that category, yet it remains as Schedule 1 at the federal level. Small victory, but the small victories are adding up, and that's a very, very good thing. And I know it's just extracts for medical uses in marijuana. Non-psychoactive, but it's better than nothing, and eventually they will come around. We have a discussion forum on Reddit at davidpakman.com/Reddit. Check it out. Discuss politics with other David Pakman Show viewers and listeners. We'll take a quick break and be back with a lot more.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Dr. Stephen Buser, who's a clinical psychiatrist, also a former major in the United States Air Force. He's an editor, along with Leonard Cruz, who's been a guest on the program, of A Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of President Trump. So let's start, if we can, with the recent assessment that was done of Donald Trump, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, done as part of what was really a physical exam by the White House doctor, Ronnie Jackson. From a medical perspective, how valuable is that 30-point assessment in figuring out whether a patient might be experiencing some of the early signs of cognitive decline?
For cognitive decline, it's a good test, but only in the more severe, cases. A lot of people have been looking since that, report at the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And when you look at it, it's a very basic exam. You need to name 3 animals: a rhinoceros, a camel, and a lion. You need to do very simple arithmetic. You need to draw the face of a clock. So it's really not, high-level evaluation. Now, it is good if somebody had severe dementia, if somebody had clinically severe Alzheimer's disease. Those things can be difficult, to do. But it's really not a good test of really the cognitive abilities you need to be in the presidency.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that you get 6 out of 30 points, you get 20% for just telling the interviewer the date and city where the exam is being conducted. That strikes me as testing for something far more advanced than what is even being sort of hypothesized about Donald Trump. Is that right?
Right. It's not bad as a kindergarten entrance exam. If you want to see if your child is ready for kindergarten, it would be good for that. Or if you had a severe question of Alzheimer's disease. But again, the complexities of running the government, that is by far not a suitable test. The other concern is Trump himself supposedly asked for the exam. And that's highly unusual. As a clinician, we're always suspect if a patient asks for a specific test, because there's no way to know that patient didn't prep or prepare for that test.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about what would be a more accurate way of testing for what it is that is sort of concerning about Trump's behavior?
Right. There have been a number of concerns around President Trump really since the beginning of the election process back in 2016. One concern was narcissism. We put out a book, Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of President Trump, where we looked at narcissistic elements within it. And there's been a lot written, a lot spoken of, since then. There's further concerns of emotional stability. I wrote a piece in the New York Times about, would he be safe, with the nuclear reliability criterion. And then there's the third piece, which you've alluded to today, which is cognitive abilities. When you look at a 71-year-old gentleman, the oldest person to enter his first term in the presidency, who has unusual judgments, who has declining vocabulary with an over-reliance on superlatives, that has difficulty completing a thought, there are increasing concerns that somebody like that may indeed have a cognitive impairment. The only good way to assess that would be a full neuropsychological evaluation, which is 3 to 8 hours in duration. It's not a 10-minute quick can you name an animal test, but it's an in-depth psychological test done by a neuropsychologist that could really root out early cognitive impairments. Nobody is saying that he's got severe dementia at this point, but what many are concerned of, does he have early cognitive impairment for somebody who's in their 70s?
We now know that at some point during his presidency, Ronald Reagan was already experiencing some cognitive decline as a result of Alzheimer's. Is your sense that even Reagan at that time would have passed the Montreal Cognitive Assessment?
Most likely. Of course, it's impossible to answer that because, as far as I know, he didn't have the test. But correct, at the point where Ronald Reagan was in office and there were people with concerns, it would have been quite easy to pass the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, I suspect. That's a guess, of course, but that is not a difficult test to pass.
So I know that there will be people who watch this interview, listen to this interview, Doctor, and they will say, wait, hold on a second. What happened to this principle of never evaluating or even approximating possible diagnoses for someone that a psychiatrist has not examined directly and in person? Isn't that what Dr. Buser is doing? He's using media clips and appearances of Donald Trump to hypothesize about what may be going on cognitively, and that is something that the medical community looks down upon. Can you talk a little bit about that and how those sort of standards have shifted over time with regard to certain types of conditions?
You're quite right. There's certainly a debate, particularly in the American Psychiatric Association, on whether it's reasonable to diagnose a public figure from afar. And that's known as the Barry-Goldwater rule, going back to the 1964 election between LBJ and Barry Goldwater. And it's been widely accepted, mostly, that psychiatrists and psychologists shouldn't formally diagnose a politician or anybody in the public eye based solely on observed criterion. And in our book, we actually talk a lot about that. We have an entire chapter on the Goldwater rule, and we actually agree mostly with the Goldwater rule. And I've been very careful, both in my writing and in my public appearances, to not diagnose Donald Trump with anything. Now, that doesn't mean we can't be concerned with what we see. That doesn't mean we can't raise alarms, and it doesn't mean we can't urge further evaluation. So while I can't and won't formally diagnose President Trump with narcissistic personality disorder, with emotional instability, with a cognitive decline or impairment, I can certainly say I've seen, evidence, of symptoms that any reasonable person would want, further evaluation. Remember, this is the man who, as president, should he wake up tomorrow morning and decide he wants to launch a nuclear attack, those nuclear missiles are in the air in 5 minutes, and those missiles cannot be recalled, they cannot be aborted, they will strike their target. That could lead to a full-scale nuclear exchange, which really could end civilization as we know it on the planet. So do you want somebody that we're concerned about that could destroy the planet in 5 minutes' time, that you feel comfortable ignoring an evaluation, not getting further information? Why do we not at least want that evaluation to be an option to protect the safety of the American people?
Yeah, I mean, I would say on the basis of identifying a giraffe and a tiger, I would say I don't want him having the button. If he could have identified like a capybara in that exam, you might be able to convince me otherwise. Let's talk about the nuclear weapon aspect of it. What specifically about all the different behaviors makes you most concerned when it comes to that example that you've mentioned twice now, the nuclear launch capability that Trump has as president?
Exactly. The nuclear concern has been one of my stronger concerns more recently. While we spoke a lot about narcissism early on in the campaign, my bigger concern currently is about nuclear accessibility. I served 12 years in the Air Force, and as a psychiatrist, one of my roles was to evaluate military personnel to see if they were fit for duty. And if they were working with nuclear material, the criterion for fitness for duty was that much stronger. Department of Defense Regulation 5210.42 lays it out. It says only those personnel with the highest degree of reliability, trustworthiness, conduct, and behavior shall be allowed to work in the vicinity of nuclear weapons. That got me thinking, suppose President Trump were instead Airman Trump, and suppose Airman Trump was stationed at the base I was at, and suppose I had a clear outside evidence that Airman Trump was engaged in sexually abusive behavior towards women, that he was cyberbullying on Twitter, that he was prone to erratic emotional states, that he was paranoid at times about being surveilled or persecuted unjustly, and that he had times of making highly distorted, if not frankly untruthful comments. Would I be willing to certify Airman Trump as nuclear ready under the criterion? My answer was immediately no, absolutely not without further psychological evaluation. Something like that, we would have done much more testing to see would they be safe around nuclear weapons. So that's the great irony then, that the entire nuclear chain of command, from the airman in the missile silo to the chairman, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, are all held to this very high degree of psychological stability and readiness, except one person, and that's the President of the United States, the very person who has his finger on the nuclear button.
There's actually other examples of that as well. I mean, we talked about with these Access Hollywood, grab them by the you-know-what tapes, how the other person on those tapes, the host of the program, Billy Bush, he lost his job, and Trump went on to become president of the United States. The theme of the different standards seems to be a more and more common one, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. And that gets to what can we do about this? If the stakes are really that high, if the world could be plunged into nuclear war in 5 minutes with catastrophic consequences, why do we have the whole chain of command under tight scrutiny, except the one person, the President of the United States? There are actually a number of initiatives in Congress as we speak to help this, to add to the safety and security of the American people. One is House Bill 669 with the Senate Bill 200 version that's sponsored by Representative Liu and Senator Markey. That's the Restriction for the First Use of Nuclear Weapons Act of 2017, which basically states that no president will have the authority to launch a first-strike nuclear attack without the consent of Congress. Now, if there's a retaliation needed, if somebody attacks us, we can instantly attack back. But were that to be put into law, no president would be allowed to initiate that attack. And when you think of it, why do we need to destroy the planet in 5 minutes when we could just as easily destroy the planet in 3 to 4 days deliberation, or perhaps get a different solution over those days?
I'd like to talk a little bit about narcissistic personality disorder. My dad, who's also a psychiatrist but was trained in Argentina, sort of half-jokingly once said to me, narcissistic personality disorder is what we developed to be able to assign a diagnosis to people who are just flat out insufferable. And of course, he was half kidding when he said that. But my question is, when it comes to the fitness to serve as president, narcissistic personality disorder is not in the same league as some form of cognitive decline or dementia, right? We're talking about two different things.
Well, indeed, depending how we define it, there's narcissistic traits, there's narcissistic personality style, and there's narcissistic personality disorder. Those are in a spectrum of severity, and it's really hard to determine, which of those may be going on, again, without, further evaluation. Cognitive deterioration, though, is so much more clear and dangerous and verifiable on testing. Not that narcissism isn't, but if somebody has early cognitive impairments, that will likely progress and is highly dangerous in this kind of condition. So I think we're talking about a whole different concern at that level.
Last thing I want to touch on, did you see that very bizarre video of Trump like he had a huge wad of chewing gum in his mouth when he was giving a speech and then signing an executive order that's been the subject of lots of speculation in terms of loose dentures or whatever else? Are you familiar with that video?
There are so many videos, it's actually hard to say because I've seen President Trump in numerous cases. But yes, I do believe I know the one you're referring to with that.
Yeah, so we were ultimately told that that was the result of dry mouth due to a medication that the president was taking. There was speculation about loose dentures, but really rich people tend to have dental implants, not dentures. And in any case, we were told after the medical exam, Trump doesn't have dentures. Does that entire incident feel okay to you now in terms of we've gotten a satisfactory explanation, or is it still a suspect incident in your mind?
Well, it's certainly not okay, particularly in the broader context. If that was really the only event that we were concerned about, then maybe it could be explained away with that. But if you spend 5 minutes on Google and just type in unusual behavior by President Trump on YouTube, you will find enormous amounts of material out there, all on video, all captured. This is a man who really struggles to complete a sentence. His sentences are long, they're run on, repetitive. He uses these superlatives in a almost nauseating fashion. You really get the sense that something just isn't quite right. And a MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, is not reassuring. That does not give us significant information. The only thing that would reassure me would be a nonpartisan. It would have to be somebody who didn't have a political slant, and maybe multiple evaluators, but a nonpartisan neuropsychological, in-depth, many hours evaluation. That's the only thing that would satisfy me at this point to really be reassured that the American people are in safe hands with this president.
We've been speaking to Dr. Stephen Buser. He's a clinical psychiatrist, former major in the United States Air Force, and he also edited with Leonard Cruz the book A Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of President Trump. Thanks so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We had some actual good news yesterday. It's bad for Republicans. It's bad for people who are looking to suppress the vote, but it's actually good news for democracy. We had Pennsylvania Supreme Court previously rule back in January that the way that the districts are currently drawn in Pennsylvania benefits Republicans. In other words, it's been gerrymandered to all hell and back for the benefit of the Republican Party. And this is not a shock, right? There's been a number of different major efforts in Pennsylvania for years to combine gerrymandering with voter ID to help Republicans win elections. And just as a reminder, remember when Mike Turzai, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, back in the Mitt Romney candidacy days, he straight up talked about this and did not even make an attempt to hide it as anything other than the political attack that it is. Remember this audio?
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Right. So anyway, that clip is always just disturbing. As soon as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled last month that they need to redraw the districts in Pennsylvania because it's just, again, gerrymandered to hell by Republicans, there was an immediate appeal. The Supreme Court of the United States, the big Supreme Court, not the state Supreme Court, the real one, held an emergency hearing, and they decided, yeah, the decision from the lower court stands. Pennsylvania is going to have to redraw those districts, and very soon, in accordance with the lower court's order. And when I looked at the numbers, the Pennsylvania gerrymandering is so bad that even though there are 800,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in Pennsylvania, Republicans have held 13 of the 18 districts during the 3 election cycles since the gerrymandering took place in 2011.
It's not even just a simple majority. I mean, that's a landslide difference.
It is a landslide difference. And I know that, when Trump gives a speech and the Dow drops 1,500 points, this story seems almost too small to even make a difference. But wins are wins, and this is a win, and we should be happy about it.
Well, I guess it's a little bit of a win, but Republicans got to use their gerrymandered map for
3 elections.
7 out of the 10 years that would be in place, right?
That's why the census is so important. We have the census, we have redistricting, and even if you immediately identify an injustice in that districting, it can take 7 years to get it fixed. And it's important to clarify. The Pennsylvania court decided that the gerrymandering violated the Pennsylvania Constitution, and the Supreme Court agreed. There are people who are misinterpreting or maybe misreporting this. They are confused. There are people who believe because the Supreme Court agreed with the lower court ruling, what they've said is that the gerrymandering was unconstitutional federally. That would be so huge, because if the Supreme Court ruled that what Pennsylvania did violates the federal constitution, that becomes precedent in other states. But unfortunately, that's not what the Supreme Court ruled. The Supreme Court ruled merely that the Pennsylvania court was correct, that their state constitution had been violated, period. This says nothing about the constitutionality of the gerrymandering ploys that are happening at the federal constitutional level. Still the right decision, though.
So I take it that the Pennsylvania GOP will be back at it in 2021.
Of course.
And this is what Republicans do. If you can't win the hearts and minds of voters over, you start emphasizing voter ID laws and gerrymander and get any way that you can get an advantage.
And this is why I've been saying census 2020. Sounds boring. Very, very important. One of our viewers has completely cucked Alex Jones. This is the best. We have bumper stickers here at the David Pakman Show. And I recently got an email from Ryan, who's been a member for a couple of years already. And he wrote to me and he said, David, every day driving to work, I have to stop right next to a transformer, like an electrical transformer, that has been branded with an Infowars bumper sticker. Since you clearly understand the insanity of Alex Jones and Infowars, I wondered if you would send me a David Pakman Show bumper sticker on the promise that it would be used to cover up the atrocity that is this Infowars sticker. I've been a member and daily listener for around 2 years now, and I would much rather see your sticker when I drive to work. Ryan asked and I delivered. So he sent us pictures. This was my condition. You got to send us pictures of this thing. Ryan sent to me, and we're putting up on the screen. This is the electrical transformer before Ryan got to it. This is the view from the road. And then he also took a close-up of the Infowars.com sticker on this electrical transformer. And I present to you now that same sticker covered up by a David Pakman Show bumper sticker. And you can see just the little last edge of the Infowars bumper sticker. And it has been almost completely covered.
Yeah. Maybe just a permanent marker would do the rest.
You could fill in that little white part with permanent marker if you really were committed to it. And you can see it even from across the street. This is the best. He went back across the street and took a picture of it. And it's very clearly the David Pakman Show logo, the David Pakman Show bumper sticker. And here is Ryan celebrating the accomplishment with the bumper sticker in the background. This is a fantastic job by Ryan, right? I mean, this is huge.
I love it because the people that live in that house are probably so confused
as to what's going on.
Who knows if they knew what Infowars was, but if they see that David Pakman Show logo, they're going to investigate.
I wonder if the people in the house are the people who put the Infowars bumper sticker on the thing in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah. Haven't there been stories about matches made in heaven where someone's, like a viewer was driving behind another viewer who has a David Pakman Show bumper sticker?
There's been a couple
and
sightings.
They meet each other?
Yep. So someone in Newton, Massachusetts was once driving, and they're fans of the show, and they saw another car driving around with the David Pakman Show bumper sticker. And then I believe in Tennessee there was another one where I remember viewers getting in touch. One viewer said, hey, I saw, and I don't remember what kind of car it was. Say it was, a Prius, not to stereotype, but maybe it was a Prius or whatever. I saw a Prius with the David Pakman Show bumper sticker in this town, and I announced it, and shortly thereafter someone wrote in and they said, oh yeah, I drive a Prius around in that town all the time. It's the same color car, and I have a David Pakman Show bumper sticker or something like that.
I'd love it if in a few months from now someone writes in saying that I was driving down a road in Rochester, New York, and I saw a David Pakman Show bumper sticker on a Transformer.
I might have forgotten to even say that this was Rochester, New York.
Are we allowed to say that?
No, we are. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if I did. Anyway, Ryan, you did it. You cucked them. And what else can I say? Congratulations. And with peace and love, let's do it again sometime, somewhere else. Get in touch if there are prominent stickers you want to cover up in other parts of the country. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. And I got a voicemail that is at least partially dealing with the massive stock market crash that we saw earlier this week. Let's take a listen to it together.
Hi, David, Patrick. My name is Ralph, and I'm from a gerrymandered portion of Pennsylvania.
Right.
But that's not why I called. The stock market has been dropping, and it just can't be the fault of Donald Trump. So how did those despicable Democrats sabotage him? See you on YouTube. Bye.
Yep. I actually tweeted sarcastically yesterday something along the lines of, the stock market decline can't have anything to do with Trump's policies because his tax cut has given people even as much as $1.50 a week in tax reduction. This is clearly Obama's fault. Obama and Hillary in orange jumpsuits soon, or something like that. And most people who follow me understood that it was total sarcasm, but there were actually some people who said, David, you're delusional. That's Hillary and Obama are never going to be in orange jumpsuits. So I guess I was so serious in my tweet that I even tricked some of my own followers.
Sarcasm doesn't always work on social media, I noticed. Like, I remember you had a tweet just recently about how you believed that Trump was 6'3" and 239 pounds, and you also believed the validity of the Nunes memo.
Sure, and it doesn't always translate well. But that's kind of the fun of sarcasm on social media. All right, you can find me on Twitter at @dpakman. And you're on Twitter also, right? Are you producer Pat Ford?
Producer Pat Ford.
Producer Pat Ford on Twitter. Yep, it's all happening. And the Eggman tweets you sometimes, doesn't he?
Yeah, or direct messages, which is even worse.
That's another thing.
Scary.
The authorities have been notified. Now we're kidding, Eggman. That's we're actually they have been notified, but not because of the Eggman's messages. On the bonus show today, the White House plans to give restaurant owners more control over tips. That's not a plan that a lot of people are thrilled with, particularly people who work in restaurants. Michelle Bachmann has decided that she's not going to try to win Al Franken's former Senate seat because she didn't hear from God that she should do it. And there is a woman who says she won a $600 million jackpot in the lottery, but she has as yet left the prize unclaimed. And we will talk about why, and we will talk about whether Pat or I would do something similar if we were to win the lottery. And we'll talk about the lottery a little more broadly, maybe, because I'm interested in lotteries. I think it's a whole thing.
We'll find out.
You can get access to the bonus show in two ways. Number one, become a member at davidpakman.com/membership. Very, very easy way to do it. Number two, become a patron at least the $5 a month level at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. Both means get you access to the same world famous bonus show, and I look forward to speaking to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.